My subject today is effects of Agnihotra on our environment, scientific aspects of Agnihotra. So just now Lisa and Tom have explained this simple method of Agnihotra, which everybody can easily perform at home and also experience the effects on body, mind, on plant and animals. And believe what you experience is always a very good principle in life. And if we experience that by doing Agnihotra, our health improves, stress is getting reduced, as Lisa also mentioned, and that it's getting easier to reach a deep state of meditation, and then our plants grow better, then that will be enough to continue practicing Agnihotra. So why then do we at all need scientific studies of Agnihotra? I will give 3 reasons. First, if you want to share this method with others, then it's helpful, as nowadays many people believe in science even more than in their own experience. And now the situation on planet Earth is such that as many people as possible should get that knowledge and make use of it. Second, we experience so many wonderful effects of Agnihotra, and we would just like to understand how all that is possible, how these effects come about. How does this Agnihotra work? What are the underlying mechanisms? How do the energies coming from the sun at sunrise and sunset, the mantras uttered at that time, the copper pyramid of fixed shape and size, and the flame we get by burning these specific substances, how do all these parts work together to get the effects we experience? This seems to be quite an interesting question. And then, although we can experience quite a lot of beneficial effects of Agnihotra on ourselves, our plants, our animals, there are some areas which are beyond the range of our senses. For example, we cannot easily find out whether some fruits or vegetables which are polluted with pesticides, and therefore we cannot easily find out whether it helps to soak these vegetables and fruits in Agnihotra ash water as is recommended. For that, some scientific experiment would help. Also, we cannot taste, smell, or feel radioactivity. But it is said, and Lisa also mentioned that Agnihotra and Agnihotra ash neutralize the negative effects of radioactivity. Our senses cannot detect that. So we need laboratories and specialized scientists to answer these questions, and we need to do some controlled experiments. Simple observations will not help. So now when we talk about science, it is important to make some distinction. So one level is observations and reports. Everybody can make observations on the effects of Agnihotra, observations on effects on himself, on his plants, on his fellow people, on animals, and so on. That is one level, and that's very valid and important, of course. Then we have the level of results of controlled experiments done by modern science. That is a different thing. If you experience something, that's one thing. If you do a controlled experiment, you know, you need a greater number of people. You need to do some statistics. You need to exclude the placebo effect if it affects people. And then another level is explanations by modern science. That is going a little bit deeper, finding how things work, the underlying mechanisms of how things work. That is the most interesting level, I would say. And then on the other side, we have statements of Vedic knowledge regarding Agnihotra. So we should not confuse these two things. Lisa had mentioned several of such statements of Vedic science. They have partly been confirmed by modern science, and partly they have not been checked yet. So we always have to make the clear distinction. What is modern science and what are statements from Vedic knowledge? So what is the relation between Vedic science and modern science? Of course, science can play a very important role to examine the method suggested by this ancient knowledge of Vedas. And what we do is we just treat these Vedic statements as hypotheses in terms of modern science. And then we test them. But before we can test them, we first have to understand them. And that needs some kind of little bit more than translation. Because sometimes these statements of Vedic knowledge, they use terms which we don't have in modern scientific language, like prana or subtle energies. Or as Lisa mentioned about this breathing, you know, we need some, they use some terms which we don't have in English. So in modern science, that concept is not there. So we first have to try to find some corresponding thing. And sometimes it may be very difficult. For example, one statement of Vedas is that there is fire in water. Okay, come on. You would say that's just impossible. If there's fire in water, you know, immediately it will be extinguished. Can't be fire in water. So if we cannot make sense of such a statement, then I would just suggest, okay, just be calm and put that aside. We don't understand it now. Maybe we will understand later. Until we understand, we just keep it as something which we don't know. You know, that is also a very important attitude of a scientist, to admit if he does not know. And actually, you know, Socrates, the greatest philosopher of the Greek times, one of his statements was, "I know that I do not know." And that is a very important insight. And if we don't know, we cannot admit it. And that's also the beauty of science, that, you know, slowly there's some progress and we will know things which we some years ago have not known yet. Now, what are the benefits of Homa therapy? According to traditional knowledge, all nature comes back to harmony, and that refers to our environment, atmosphere, soil, water resources, biodiversity gets restored. Food security can be maintained, very important now in our times, and human health improves, both physical and mental, also now very crucial. And modern science can play an important role in examining the methods suggested by ancient knowledge of the Vedas. But please note, whatever I now say about scientific results of Agnihotra, all this is based on the Agnihotra, which was now explained by Lisa, because as she mentioned, there are different meanings of Agnihotra. People use it for different methods. So whatever I say, it is only referring to this method, which was just explained right now. Now, what are the effects of Agnihotra on our environment? Let's start with water. And long time back, maybe nearly 40 years back in Poland. That was one school teacher, Elżbieta Gerlecka, and she had some water where she had kept flowers, and after some time that was really bad, smelling bad, and probably full of all different kinds of bacteria, whatever. So what she did is she had this water and she separated into 2 bottles, and in one bottle she added Agnihotra ash. And after a long time, even with Agnihotra ash, the water got very clear, no smell at all, and she says it tasted like drinking water. And the other water without Agnihotra ash, that water was green, a lot of algae were there, and had a smell of stagnant pond water. That was an observation she did at that time, and that was quite interesting. Now, another observation that is from our friends in Australia. They drilled the bore well, and the water they got was highly saline and alkaline. pH was 9.5 and salinity 1150 parts per million. So that water you couldn't drink, you couldn't give to your plants, you couldn't give to your animals. It was just useless. So what they did is they added Agnihotra ash to this bore well and performed Agnihotra next to the bore well. And within 6 months, the water quality improved totally. pH came down from 9.5 to 7.2, and the salinity from 1150 to 720 parts per million. And now it was within the range of drinking water according to World Health Organization. So that was another observation. Now some controlled experiment, which was done at some college in India, in Pune, Ferguson College. They did 10 replicates of the experiment. They took water from some river, Mula-Mutta River in Pune, very much a polluted river. And they took that water and filled one glass cylinder with Agnihotra ash and poured the water so that it ran through this glass cylinder. And then they measured water quality before, water quality after it had been poured through this glass cylinder. And you see all the parameters are much improved. Just look at the last two figures. The bacterial count went down by 98 or 93%, depending on the method they were checking that. So the water was totally improved. It was very clear. And that was, here you see the data in detail. That water was now fulfilling the standards given by World Health Organization for drinking water. Now, what is interesting here, what would be an explanation for that? What are the chemical processes which are involved to purify water? For example, what leads to the change in pH, chemical oxygen demand, biological oxygen demand? How is it possible that the pH and salinity in the borewell water come down to an acceptable range? We do not know yet. These processes still have to be researched. One scientist suggested a hypothesis. He said that maybe some beneficial microbes which are able to improve water quality, they are activated by Agnihotra. That is one possible explanation, but that has not been tested yet, so we'll still have to see. Another experiment was done in the same college in Pune, and that used one substance, chemical substance, colchicine, which prevents mitosis, means cells do not divide. That means plants cannot grow, or plants are also animal cells, the same thing. So what they did is they took, mixed some of this colchicine into water, 2 grams per liter. And they put this water into 2 beakers. One beaker was just the water. In the other beaker, they also added some Agnihotra ash. So you see here, left side, it is this Agni, and then they put an onion on top. Left side, you see, this onion does not develop any roots. It's not possible because colchicine is just supposed to do that, prevent mitosis, prevent any growth. The right side, you see, adding Agnihotra ash has helped in such a way that now all the roots they built, and you see they're nearly touching the bottom of the beaker. So Interesting would be here to find out whether colchicine is actually degraded by Agnihotra ash, or whether Agnihotra ash only or just neutralized the effect of colchicine. And in both cases, what are the mechanisms? So more research is needed, but that's a quite interesting area. Purification of industrial effluent. That was done in close to Mumbai. There was one textile factory, and the effluent of this factory was so poisonous, so toxic, that aquatic life was no longer possible. So what these scientists did, they took a 15% concentration of this effluent, means 150 ml and 850 ml pure water, 150 ml effluent, 850 ml pure water, and added and then tested it, and the COD, chemical oxygen demand, was 573. They added Agnihotra ash per liter, half a gram. The COD went down to less than half, 270. And, oh, that is missing in the slide. After adding this half gram of Agnihotra ash, aquatic life was possible again. With this 15% concentration, it was not possible. So, but after Agnihotra ash was added, aquatic life was possible again in this very toxic solution. Now, the effects of Agnihotra on soil. About the importance of soil, I want to read one quote from a Sanskrit text, which was written 1500 BC, means more than 3,500 years before our time. And this says, the quote says, "Upon this handful of soil, our survival depends. Husband it, and it will grow our food, our fuel, our shelter, and surround us with beauty. Abuse it, and the soil will collapse and die, taking humanity with it." Now, we should take that warning serious, because according to FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of United Nations, already now 1/3 of the world's soil has been degraded. And they say if agricultural procedures would continue as they are now, the global amount of arable soil per person in 2050 will be only a quarter of the level in 1960. And that will just not be sufficient to grow this growing number of people. So we have to take care of soil health. The soil needs to be rejuvenated first by Homa therapy. And if by Homa therapy soil is rejuvenated, then different types of microorganisms, starting with from the levels of viruses, bacteria, fungi, algae, thrive. And a healthy microflora and microfauna is created. That has been, there have been some tests. One was more than 30 years ago done in US about the solubility of phosphate. You know, phosphorus is there in the soil normally, but most of it is there in soil in an insoluble form, means the water, the plants cannot take it in through their roots. So this is why farmers add water-soluble phosphate, which in the production process means a lot of pollution. So now this scientist found out if you add Agnihotra ash to the soil, then the percentage of water-soluble phosphate increases. You don't have to add any phosphate fertilizer, just add Agnihotra ash and the water-soluble phosphate will be increased. Now, a similar experiment was done at FAL, Government Research Institute in Germany, and the same thing that could be shown. Now the question was, how come? How does this Agnihotra ash increase the water-soluble phosphate? And there was one hypothesis that phosphorus-solubilizing bacteria could increase if you add Agnihotra ash, and they would be then be responsible for this increased quantity of water-soluble phosphorus in soil. That hypothesis was suggested more than 10 years ago by some scientists whom I met in Lucknow. And now, a few years ago, this hypothesis has been confirmed by an experiment done in Ratnagiri, and they added 1% of Agnihotra ash to soil, and they found out that nitrogen-fixing bacteria multiplied 100 times, and phosphorus-solubilizing bacteria even 1,000 times. And at the same time, fungal flora was controlled. So this experiment could show that this hypothesis about phosphorus-solubilizing bacteria that could be confirmed. Now, another problem in soil is sodic soil and also acidic soil. Both are a big problem. And one experiment was done in India, in Unnao, which is between Kanpur and Lucknow. And that was on the soil, which was highly sodic. And there they planted they divided the area in 3 plots, planted one plot with agrochemicals, one organic with vermicompost, and one organic with vermicompost and Agnihotra ash. And the soil was tested after the season, and the pH at this plot with agrochemicals stayed the same, 9.86. With vermicompost, organic with vermicompost, it went down to 9.06, which is quite a good result already. But with vermicompost and Agnihotra ash, it came down to 7.67, which is nearly neutral, more than 2 points within just one season. Also, potash and phosphorus were found in more abundant quantities in this plot where Agnihotra ash was used. Now we've seen, okay, Agnihotra ash helps for sodic soil. Now what about acidic soil? And there was one observation in Poland on the Homa farm, Pogorania, and you will in this one of the coming sessions meet Parvati and Jarek Bitzberg, who run this farm. So some agricultural engineer came and tested the soil, and the pH was 4.4, and he told them, forget about it, nothing will grow here. And so what could they do? They still started, and of course used Agnihotra procedure there, and Agnihotra ash, and some compost, and you see they grow everything there, all the vegetables which nobody grows there in that area, and they have abundant crops. So Agnihotra helps to harmonize nature. If pH is too high, you know, it comes down. If it's too low, it comes up. How is that possible? We do not know. There's still more studies necessary to find the underlying mechanisms. Effects of Agnihotra on the atmosphere. uh, this Vedic traditional knowledge says that Agnihotra purifies the atmosphere, and the purified atmosphere purifies you. So now, how can we validate that with methods of modern science? Let us look, what are the kinds of pollution in our atmosphere? Basically, it's three kinds: biological, chemical, physical. Number four would be radioactive, that will treat differently. Okay, so let's look at biological first. This was an experiment done in many places. They count the number of the bacterial load of the atmosphere before Agnihotra, after Agnihotra. What they do is they just take a petri dish with a nutrient. They open the petri dish for say 10 minutes, then close, and then it will be sent for some period of say 24 hours where the bacteria are cultivated. So that is done before Agnihotra. And then the same thing is done after Agnihotra. So after Agnihotra, some petri dishes are open for same time, 10 minutes, closed, and then sent for cultivation. And you see the difference, a big reduction in bacteria before Agnihotra, after Agnihotra. That was biological air pollution. Now let's look at physical air pollution. At chemical and physical air pollution. Chemical air pollution is mainly SOx and NOx. Physical air pollution is particulate matter. And this experiment was done in different places in different universities. This was from North Maharashtra University in Chalgaon. And you see that all the parameters, chemical and physical, go down by approximately 30–40%. In the beginning, there's a little increase because when you have the fire of Agnihotra, there's some smoke, so particulate matter, for example, increases, but then all the parameters go down. And and that was just by one Agnihotra. So what we'll suggest is to continue the experiment for say 1 week and see what happens then. That was actually on the way, but then because of the Corona restrictions, I couldn't go there again and we couldn't continue. And this is just a photo showing with a high volume air sampler where the particulate matter was measured. That was done at the Vikram University in Ujjain, MP. And how to understand these processes, again, we do not know yet. About the particulate matter, there was one possible explanation which says that these particles of Agnihotra, they somehow attract all pollution particles, and then that everything settles down on the ground. That still has to be confirmed. Negative ions in air. That was an experiment done in Germany, again, long time back, more than 30 years back. And we know that negative ions are an indicator for fresh air. So if there's a lack of negative ions, that indicates polluted air. And normally, any smoke reduces the amount of negative ions. So I went to one place, one lab where they had this instrument counting negative ions. And when I told them what I want to do, they asked, okay, is there any smoke in this procedure, Agnihotra? And I said, yeah, sure, there will be some smoke. And then this engineer said, no, we don't have to do the experiment. If there's smoke, definitely the percentage of negative ions will go down. And I said, okay, I don't know. And in order to show, to prove his statement, he took his cigarette and blew the smoke in the direction of the instrument. And yes, negative ions went down. And I said, okay, let us see. I performed Agnihotra, and the indicator showed an increase of negative ions, quite large increase. So this engineer was shocked. He had never seen something. And it would be good to repeat this experiment. And also, that could be one explanation how Agnihotra purifies the atmosphere, because these negative ions are created, and these negative ions help to purify the atmosphere. Just one example I want to mention about the effects of Agnihotra on human health. That was one observation in Bhopal in 1982-84. You know, this Union Carbide factory in Bhopal exploded and MIC gas leaked. And that is a very, very dangerous gas, very toxic. And thousands of people died, and tens of thousands of people were seriously injured. And nobody just got away with it. But all those who were performing Agnihotra daily in Bhopal, they were safe. And there was quite some families living in the area where this catastrophe happened. And it seemed that Agnihotra was like a protective armor for all of them. So that shows that Agnihotra purifies our environment, the atmosphere, also on a very deep level, means on a level where such toxic gases are around. Still, Agnihotra purifies that, and the effects are reduced. Now, one more thing, harmful radiation. I mentioned that before when we had biological, chemical, physical pollution of the air. Now I took radiation away. It would be in the physical realm, but it's a separate because it's so important. Vedic knowledge says when Agnihotra is performed, the Agnihotra smoke gathers particles of harmful radiation in the atmosphere and on a very subtle level neutralizes their radioactive effect. Nothing is destroyed, merely changed. And radioactivity is an increasing problem all over the world. The big catastrophes were Chernobyl and a couple of years now ago, Fukushima. And after Fukushima, high levels of radioactivity were found in Western USA. And also in the atmosphere, you know, after some time, if there's some radioactive explosion in the atmosphere, these radioactive particles are all over the planet. They don't remain restricted to the area where it happens. So what can we do against that? Now, that is an observation from long time back from Austria. That was a report from Karin Heschel, one of our certified Homa therapy teachers. And she and her husband had a farm in some part of Austria, which is close, not so far away from Ukraine, Chernobyl. And they performed Agnihotra plus some additional fires. And after the Chernobyl accident happened, farmers were not allowed to sell their produce unless some inspection would clear them. So inspectors came, took sample of milk, fodder, vegetables, and tested them for radioactivity. And these inspectors, they were shocked when they found out that the milk and the fodder of that farm, they had normal natural levels of radioactivity, and all other surrounding farms, they had much higher radioactivity after Chernobyl, which was expected. So her place, the Homa farm, that was saved from this radioactive radiation. It is a pity at that time that they did not recognize the importance of that observation, so we do not have exact reports then some more studies would have been interesting. But we did one experiment in Kiev, Ukraine, couple of years ago, at the Academy of Sciences Physics Department. These physicists had developed an instrument to measure radioactivity in food with great accuracy within a couple of minutes. Normally it takes long, it's a complicated procedure. So they had a delegation from Japan, Fukushima, who brought with them some radioactive rice because they wanted to test this instrument. This is the instrument called Food Light, which gives you the readings after a couple of minutes. So when I heard about that, I suggested to these physicists, they should take this rice, put it in Agnihotra ash water, and then see what happens. They did that, and the initial value was 200 becquerel per kilo radioactivity, and they measured every day. And after 2 days already, radioactivity came down. And after 8 days, it was totally gone. Normally, that is not possible. Ask any physicist, he will tell you radioactivity is a property of the nucleus of an atom. And normally, there are only two ways how you can change radioactivity: fission and fusion. Fission means splitting of a nucleus, which is normally done by bombarding the nucleus with high energy neutrons, or fusion, that means combining two or more nuclei. For that, you normally need high pressure and high temperature. And in Agnihotra process, we do not have any of these. So how is it possible then that Agnihotra and Agnihotra ash change radioactivity? This is still an unsolved problem. There's one possible explanation. Some scientists in Eastern Europe, Ukraine and Russia, they found out that there are certain bacteria which can influence the decay of cesium-136. So this decay is sped up, but it took 100 days for them to get any result. So is it possible that with Agnihotra ash, same bacteria work, but the process is sped up from 100 days to only 10 days? That is a possibility, but we do not know yet, so more research is necessary. Now, I've mentioned several examples, several observations, several experiments. Now, what is the deeper science behind all that? How do these effects come about? What are the underlying mechanisms? Just as an example, I show you germination of seeds. You have at left side germination of seeds with just water, middle with control ash, right with Agnihotra ash. Control ash means we burn the same substances also with cow dung, ghee, rice, but not in this copper pyramid, some other copper vessel, and not at the time of sunrise or sunset, and no mantra. But chemically seen, it should be the same thing. So these two ashes, and that's interesting, have show different effects. They show different effects germination of seeds, that is what we just saw, in purification of water, in healing of wounds. So now these two ashes, Agnihotra ash, control ash, they have different, show different effects, means they must be different. So we tried to find out what is the difference. So we did different methods like infrared absorption. You see there are some different peaks if you do infrared absorption. We did X-ray diffraction. Also here you see some different peaks, but it's not totally clear. So now more experiments are in the planning stage, like scanning electron microscopy, UV visible light spectroscopy, particle size measuring, and so on. But as there is a difference in the effects of Agnihotra ash and control ash, there must be also some difference in these ashes. We don't know exactly what makes the difference, so we have to find out. But it's clear it must be a difference because the effects are different. Now we come to something which I call subtle energies. Some of the effects of Agnihotra and Agnihotra ash are difficult to understand and explain in terms of modern science. So effects are there. They are well established by observations and by control experiments and by many replications, but still an explanation is missing, like for the different effects of Agnihotra ash and control ash on plants, purification of water, healing of wounds. In order to find explanation, we may have to look into subtle energies. What are subtle energies? Just one example. We took distilled water, 10 bottles, and we kept 5 of these bottles in an Agnihotra room, 5 were kept in the lab. And after 5 days, the bottles from the Agnihotra rooms were brought back to the lab. And then to all the bottles, the same quantity of E. coli was added. And then the growth of bacteria was observed. And there was a big difference. You see, the blue columns show the bacterial growth in water which was kept in the lab, and the red columns show bacterial growth in the water which was kept in Agnihotra room. And even after 5 days in the water which was kept in the Agnihotra room, the bacterial growth was less than after 1 day in the water which was kept in the lab. But remember, you know, it was the same water, it was distilled water, so no bacteria were there in the water before. And only after this water was taken out of Agnihotra room, bacteria were added. And still somehow the water must have been, some properties of the water must have changed. Can't be some chemical change because it was H2O in both cases all the time. So the question is there some subtle energy involved in it which would explain why bacterial growth is so much different? Maybe another experiment which was done a long time back in Eastern Europe might help to understand. This physicist took a glass basin like an aquarium, which was filled with water, and at one end of this basin, he had a light source, and at the other end, it was measured. The light intensity was measured. And different interventions was done. First, distilled water was used as control. Second, the same water, but some prana healing was done to the water. And third, same water and Agnihotra was performed in the room. And you see totally different lines of this light intensity going through the water. So Agnihotra had a big effect on this quality of water, on this property of water. And the question is whether such changes, although they are rather subtle, could explain why water in Agnihotra atmosphere inhibits growth of E. coli. Let us look at another experiment done by the same physicist in Eastern Poland. Magnetic permeability of water was measured. Again, he had some aquarium filled with water, and he had one magnetic source on one side and measured magnetic strength on the other side. And he had water not affected by Agnihotra, the average tap water in Agnihotra atmosphere, and distilled water in Agnihotra atmosphere. And you see there's a big difference, especially between the water, tap water distilled with Agnihotra and the other waters. So some magnetic properties of water have changed. First, we have seen some light absorption property of water has changed by performing Agnihotra. Then also some magnetic properties of water have changed. And there were no chemical influences because no ash was added and no fume. But as we know that our body, our cells of humans, plants, animals, they consist to 70% or more of water. And electric and magnetic properties of water, they are very much important for many physiological processes in the cells of plants. So if these magnetic, electric properties of water change, then that can have a big impact on all different physiological processes in our bodies. What we've seen, this energy may play an important role. Still, they are small in the sense that their intensity is very, very little. Means the forces, they are very little. So we call this subtle energy, but I want to make a distinction between subtle energy number 1 and subtle energies type 2. So subtle energies type 1, these energies are very weak, but they are of known type. Still, as the magnitude is rather low, these energies often have been neglected or disputed. So we have seen 2 examples just now of these subtle energies type 1. But for explanation of effects of Agnihotra, type 2 subtle energies are necessary also. Type 2 subtle energies refer to energies which are not known yet. Means we observe some effects which cannot be explained with energies we know. And ancient knowledge often gives us hints of such subtle energies. They use different names like prana, ki, chi, or organ. And we should be grateful to such hints from different traditions, as they may lead us to some interesting hypotheses. Still, we should be careful to not confuse what ancient knowledge says with results which are confirmed by modern science. But on the other hand, it's nothing mysterious about this type of subtle energies. It is obvious that things which cannot be measured today may still exist, like electricity did exist before we were able to measure it. And what cannot be measured today may well be detectable by instruments of tomorrow. Anyway, as science proceeds, hopefully more and more of the subtle energies type 2 will become of type 1 as we understand the subtle functioning of nature better. Now, one example which shows that subtle energies type 2 related to Agnihotra must exist. That was done. That was an experiment done some time back about influence of Agnihotra on water. We know that if you add Agnihotra ash to water, water gets purified. If you just keep Agnihotra next, water next to Agnihotra in an open bottle, then water also gets purified. First, there may be some chemical influences of the ash, second, of the fumes. But now, if we close the bottle, water also gets purified. So there is no more chemical reactions involved. There must be some kind of energy field which purifies the water. The question is, which kind of energy can that be? For that, we did one experiment. We kept part of these water bottles in metal containers to shield off electromagnetic radiations. And we measured the water for pH, DO, COD, total hardness, and coliform bacteria. Now here you see the arrangement. At the left side, you see all these metal containers. On the right side, you see one water bottle. But the same type of water bottles was also put in all these metal containers. So the water did not touch the metal. Now here you see the total arrangement. We also put some of the bottles at different distances so that we could see whether the distance from Agnihotra makes a difference. It did not. Now the result you see, especially look at the right column, coliform bacteria. And the reduction in coliform bacteria was between 68 and 70%. And it did not make some significant difference whether these bottles were kept in a metal container or not. Means that electromagnetic radiation, electromagnetic field cannot be alone responsible for the effect of Agnihotra on water. There must be something else. There must be some kind of energy which is beyond the electromagnetic range. Which is that kind of energy? We do not know. That is a challenge for the science of physics. Maybe it could be some kind of prana, which is mentioned in Vedic texts. But then the big challenge is how to measure this kind of prana energy. This is still work in progress. But that also means that understanding how Agnihotra works is not just application of modern science, but also it will lead to further development of modern science. And we have to see that science is not a fixed body of knowledge, but it's a never-ending process of striving for truth. Okay, that's it. And I just wanted to show you two nice slides which show the how sunrise, sunset move around the planet. Now you see this slide. It is just India has just had sunrise, and now all countries west of India, they are still in the night. Sunrise is coming soon. And the next one is here, India is just had sunset, and sun is setting down now in other countries. This is nice to see where the places where Agnihotra would be performed. And we have done one map where all the points where Agnihotra is performed, you would see this. By the way, at equinox, you don't have this curve, you have two straight lines, because if you just go south or north, you have the same time of Agnihotra. Okay, that is the end. I thank you very much for your attention, and I made it exactly in time.